Hello again. It's the bodysuit episode of the Rouge log. Because it's so skin tight, I'm just going to make a tube with my white test fabric and use draping techniques to get the look that I want. I did quickly do the draw around silhouette technique to see if I could get a jumping point, but because she's got so much going on with her body shape, it obviously wasn't going to work. So I'm starting with the front, and I've pinned down a long dart down the front to follow her body. I wanted to do like a fakey seam top stitch in this area, but it looks like we're going to get a real seam. I wasn't actually planning on having a seam going up the centre, but I guess it's going to happen. I wanted the bodysuit to look more structured and sewn, instead of just a vacuum sock, so I guess I'm getting what I want. I just eyeballed the yoke for the inner leg seam, and it seems to be about right. I just keep pinning and rearranging until the fit looks good. The top shape around the chest doesn't need to be too high because the pink chest piece is going to cover it later, but I still want it to be a nice shape. I know it's there. For the centre seam, I'm just going to mirror this piece, so once the rest of this side is correct, I'll trim the excess. But before I do any cutting out, I'll sew the dart so that it's nice and secure. I'm using hot pink thread so it'll show up against the white fabric. Using light colours with contrasting thread makes everything a lot easier. I probably should have wrapped her or used masking tape so that I don't sew the bodysuit onto her body, but I managed not to do that. When I get to the underboob kind of area, I start sewing smaller, more perpendicular stitches so that it's nice and snug. Now I feel like I can start cutting into it because the dart is secure and it all looks good. Then I can cut out the dart nice and carefully. At this point I took the pattern piece, I traced around it and did a test run for the front. It went really well, it looks so good in white, it kind of puts me in mind of like Raven from the Titans in black, and then when she's purified she's in white. Maybe Rouge needs a white outfit sometime. So this Rouge has, it kind of looks like panties, but I'm really interested in the kind of doll making where there's a skeleton and then the body is built with foam and batting. So I've been playing around with adding to her shape using batting to see how it feels. I don't enjoy patterning butts much, so building it with batting where I can trim down a smooth transition felt better. I repeated this with the back of the bodysuit. It wasn't as interesting, there were no cool darts, just a big curve for the booty. I'm using card to trace the pattern onto, partly because I want to keep the pattern, and the card is sturdier, but also the dart in the centre of the bodysuit needs to be rigid, so it's not going to warp when I trace it, and regular paper has a bit more wiggle to it. In fact, to make sure it's nice and accurate, I'm going to very quickly use basting spray to lay it flat and not stretched and not twisted. I'm not sure if this little bit here is quite right, so I squared it off. If it was right, I can just snip it back. Because the bodysuit is dark, we're tracing again onto tearaway stabilizer, then I can iron this onto the back of the fabric and be able to see the pattern outline better, and I'll be able to be nice and accurate with my seams. Because I'm extra, I actually cut the bodysuit out in black and then in grey, This grey was supposed to be a really dark navy, like just a perfect match to the Adventure 2 game model. I have a real life swatch in a book and I ordered it, and the store sent me this grey instead and told me they don't have the navy. And I was just devastated, but as I'm holding them both up to Rouge and against her body and her wings, I'm unsure if I actually would rather use the grey. The black feels a bit too stark, and like the details that I want to add might not show up as nicely. I basted everything first because there's so many curves and ease to fit together, and then go over it with a nice machine backstitch. Then, to make some nice fakey flat felled seams, I'm going to line up the original seam with the centre of the foot, and then offset my needle to the left so that I can run a second parallel stitch along it. I could use a twin needle for this, but I just wasn't feeling like setting one up. The top area of the seam will be hidden by the chest piece, so I'm not too worried about how it's going to look up here. It's looking super cool at the moment. I left the inseam open for fitting, so at the minute it's kind of like a little black dress. Or grey. I went for grey in the end. It just looked a lot cleaner and the seam detailing I wanted came up much nicer. I had to pop some of her stuffing out to get the suit over her butt. I thought about leaving a side seam or a back seam open so that she could just be sewn into it, but I'd rather just restuff her later. I did decide to hand sew her inseam just because it felt like it was going to give me some trouble with the machine and I wanted to have some control. Doing it by hand meant I could fix any unfortunate seams in that area more quickly. I also should probably mention that the reason she has no lower arms or legs at the minute is because of how I wanted to fit the bodysuit. The way I've patterned her body and her limbs meant that her boots and gloves would always be separate, but I feel like this was way easier to work with her and fit her without her arms getting in the way. And I was actually unsure if I'd made her thighs long enough, and I'd been considering putting in an extra panelled leg that the bodysuit would cover, but actually that part was all in my head and she looks fine. I feel like going about it this way was the best way to get the shape of her body right and the way her outfit is layered. I'll add her arms and legs now that the bodysuit's on. I will, however, refrain from sewing the neckline on the bodysuit down until I've made the pink chest piece, because it's going to be really annoying if I've accidentally gone too high and then have to take it down. I'm hoping the bulk of the bodysuit underneath will kind of make her more chesty, if you know what I mean. And that's the suit done! I'm really pleased with it so far, and I'm really excited to keep going with the rest of her outfit and her body.